Servant leadership. What is this theory about? Today we will explore the model created by Robert K. Greenleaf. The theory's foundation, characteristics, and style will be examined. Furthermore, a discussion on how employees respond to the application of servant leadership and the overall outcomes of organizations who employ this style will conclude this presentation. I'm Tammy Williams. Please join me on this journey. To explore the foundation and the theory of servant leadership, we must look to the founding father, Robert K. Greenleaf, as you can see pictured here. Who was he, and what made him explore and basically detail this leadership theory in an essay?
Robert Greenleaf was the founder of the modern servant leadership movement and the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. Greenleaf was born in Terre Haute, Indiana in 1904. After graduating from Carleton College in Minnesota, he went to work for AT&T, then the American Telephone and Telegraph Company. For the next 40 years, he researched management, development, and education. All along, he felt a growing suspicion that the power-centered authoritarian leadership style so prominent in U.S. institutions was not working, and in 1964 he took an early retirement to found the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, which was first called the Center for Applied Ethics. According to his essay, Essentials of Servant Leadership, Greenleaf's philosophy had its roots from reading a work of fiction in 1958. The idea of the servant as leader came out of reading Hermann Hesse's Journey to the East.
Now that we have an idea of who Robert K. Greenleaf was and the foundation of servant leadership, we can now dive into what exactly are the characteristics found in servant leadership. By exploring this image, you can see that there are various different characteristics that are involved in this leadership theory. These include empathy, healing, awareness, conceptualization, foresight, persuasion, stewardship, commitment to growth of people, building community, and lastly, listening. Now, not all of these characteristics will be necessary, but they're a great foundation for trying to explore what servant leadership is about and improving our ways of being a servant leader. Many of us have seen this very popular photo. What does it mean to you, and what does it depict in your mind? Clay Brewer, a student at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, wrote an article on servant leadership, a review of literature, in the spring of 2010. Not only does he discuss the foundation and background of Robert K. Greenleaf, but he also talks about, in depth, the characteristics of servant leaders. Listening, he describes this as successful people understanding the incredible value of becoming a good listener. What kind of leadership skills do you have as a leader? Think about that for a moment. He quotes Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president, as saying, "The ear of the leader must ring with the voices of the people." Leaders should understand listening is meeting a need. We definitely have to take the time to sit back and listen in depth of what the needs, the wants, and the concerns of our employees are, and then do our best to improve their environment and make them want to produce and come to work each day. Next, Brewer describes empathy. Servant leaders strive to connect and understand people. General Norman Schwarzkopf remarked once, "I have seen competent leaders who stood in front of a platoon and all they saw was a platoon. But great leaders stand in front of a platoon and see it as 44 individuals, each of whom has aspirations, each of whom wants to live, each of whom wants to do good." When we look at this quote, it reminds us that we must learn about each of our employees. We have to learn their strengths, their weaknesses, and specifically what motivates them in order to serve them the right way and to get them to grow to their fullest potential. What does the overall structure visually look like in servant leadership? And how do employees respond to this type of leadership style? We can look at an article that's entitled The Functions of a Servant Leader. This was written out of the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. And this article details how the structure of servant leadership is broken down. By looking at this visual, we can see that the leader is at the bottom of servant leadership. However, in typical leadership, we can see that the leader is at the top and expresses control over the followers. In the article from the University of Johannesburg, multiple studies were conducted by this team. 7 high-quality studies indicated that servant leadership enhanced organizational citizenship behavior on an individual level. The first study showed that servant leadership was positively linked to serving culture, which in return enhanced creative behavior by the employees. The second study reported that servant leadership increased creative behavior mediated by promotion focus. The third study indicated that psychological contract mediated the relationship between servant leadership and innovative behavior. Trust was positively influenced by servant leadership in 4 different studies. The first study found a positive relationship between servant leadership and interpersonal trust. The second study reported a positive relationship with employee trust. And the third study showed that servant leadership enhanced effective trust. When all 5 studies confirmed that servant leadership increased the job satisfaction of employees, this relationship was mediated by procedural justice and psychological climate. In terms of work-life balance, one high-quality study indicated that servant leadership positively influenced work-family positive spillover and negatively influenced work-family conflict. This is especially important when we look at law enforcement agencies and police officers. When the University of Johannesburg's article talks about team outcomes, servant leadership was positively related to 4 team or group outcomes. These were listed as group organizational citizenship behavior, group identification, service climate and culture, and procedural justice climate. But when we look at organizations as a whole who employ servant leadership, 2 major organizational outcomes emerged from the data, which was researched, namely customer service and sales performance. Although law enforcement agencies are not set out for their high goal of customer service, we have to keep in mind of law enforcement being in the public eye at all times. This is due to the current technology and body cameras as well as dash cameras and people's personal video on their cell phones. However, not only was the study concentrated on just law enforcement agencies, but also public entities that were namely into sales and productivity. In conclusion, their studies show that servant leadership positively influenced individuals, teams, and organizations in various ways. Here is a table of the summary of the results that was completed by the team in the University of Johannesburg. We can see in the first column the servant leadership characteristics, in the second column the servant leadership competencies. The third column details the individual level, which has a positive correlation or a negative correlation. The fourth column shows the servant leadership outcomes, and these are based on the team level and the organizational levels. In reviewing an article by Larry C. Spears from the Spears Center entitled Character and Servant Leadership, 10 Characteristics of Effective Caring Leaders, we can examine the current shift from traditional leadership to servant leadership, not only in high profile companies, but also law enforcement. According to Mr. Spears, we are experiencing a rapid shift in many businesses and not-for-profit organizations. We're moving away from the traditional leadership styles and more towards a servant leadership basis. In those companies and law enforcement agencies that are employing servant leadership, the leaders are seeking to involve others in decision making, and it's strongly based in ethical and caring behavior. This is coupled with enhancing the growth of workers while improving the caring and quality of organizational life. If we look at the high-tech firms, such as Facebook or Twitter or Google, we see how they take care of the employees. An employee typically will come to work and experience free food, free daycare, free dry cleaning, multiple breaks based on their gym time or meal time or just to relax. By taking care of the employees, they do not lose employees typically to attrition or to other firms. Perhaps law enforcement needs to switch their ways of thinking and learn to treat their employees in a better way, taking care of them. Also, according to this article, many companies named to Fortune magazine's annual listing of the 100 best companies to work for incorporate servant leadership and have integrated it into their corporate cultures. In conclusion, servant leadership characteristics often occur naturally with many individuals. As leaders, we must find these individuals and place them in a position where they're able to mentor and help other employees so that our agencies become more successful. Lastly, we can look at how servant leadership affects an organization as a whole. The perfect example in this is Southwest Airlines. For over 30 years, Southwest Airlines has remained profitable, thanks to Herb Keller, who was the leader for numerous years and set servant leadership as his top priority.
Okay. Across town, you have the Southwest Airlines meeting, and their co-founder and famous CEO, Herb Kelleher, was retiring. The same day that the pilots were picketing American Airlines, the same pilots union members associated with Southwest spent God knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to take out a full 2-page advertising spread in USA Today thanking Herb Kelleher for his extraordinary 37 years of service to Southwest. Picketing on the one side, buying an ad to say thank you to the guy in the other. Herb Kelleher has apparently been asked, as you would imagine, dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, what is the secret to Southwest's success? And he was funny about it. He always uttered the same sentence, and when they pressed for more, even though obviously it's a complicated business, he would never give them more. He said, you have to treat your employees like customers. And, simple phrase, but it's one of those simple phrases that you can say, ho-hum, you can say, that's a cool phrase, or you can say, this is the way I'm going to lead my life as a leader. Kelleher said it, amazing guy, extraordinary experiences at Southwest. You have to treat your employees as customers. And what else is there to know about life? Kelleher says nothing.
In conclusion, we've explored the theory of servant leadership. In an organization which is experiencing low morale due to the traditional styles of leadership, we can explore this one and turn to it so that we may improve the organization as a whole and the happiness of our employees.